Behind the veil of one of the world's richest nations lives a woman whose wealth is so vast, so incomprehensibly enormous, that it makes billionaires look like average wage earners. A woman who commands not just billions, but potentially trillions in assets and influence. Welcome to Qatar, a tiny peninsula in the Persian Gulf, smaller than Connecticut, yet home to the world's highest GDP per capita. A nation transformed from a humble pearl fishing community to a futuristic metropolis in just one generation. And at the heart of this transformation stands a figure shrouded in mystery, power, and unimaginable wealth. Sheikha Moza bint Nasser, the most prominent wife of the former Emir of Qatar and mother to the current ruler. But is she truly worth trillions as some speculate? And what does a life of such extraordinary privilege actually look like? In the next 30 minutes, I'm going to take you behind the golden curtain of Qatar's royal family to reveal the truth about the woman some call the trillionaire queen. We'll explore her rise to power, her staggering wealth, her influence on global politics, and the secret world of luxury that few humans will ever experience. But before we dive in, I need to warn you. What you're about to see isn't just a story of wealth. It's a masterclass in power, influence, and the careful crafting of a modern monarchy. By the end, you'll understand why this woman might be the most influential person you've never really heard about. Stay with me, because the truth behind Qatar's royal family fortune will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about wealth and power in the modern world. The rise of a desert kingdom. To understand the staggering wealth of Qatar's trillionaire queen, we first need to understand Qatar itself, a nation that has undergone perhaps the most dramatic economic transformation in human history. Just 70 years ago, Qatar was one of the poorest places on earth. Pearl divers plunged into the Persian Gulf day after day, risking their lives for the tiny chance of finding something valuable. The discovery of oil in 1939 started to change things, but the real transformation came in 1971 when Qatar gained independence from Britain. Then came the discovery that would change everything. Beneath Qatar's seabed lay the North Field, the largest natural gas reserve on the planet. A stroke of geological luck that would catapult this tiny nation from poverty to having the highest GDP per capita in the world. But how does all this translate to the wealth of the royal family, and specifically to Sheikha Moza? The answer lies in the structure of Qatar itself. Unlike public companies where ownership is transparent, Qatar operates more like a family business, with the Al Thani family, which has ruled since the mid-19th century, firmly in control of the nation's vast resources. At the center of this network sits the Qatar Investment Authority, the nation's sovereign wealth fund, with estimated assets of over $450 billion. But here's where things get interesting, and where rumors of trillions start to make more sense. The QIA is just the official public-facing side of Qatar's wealth. Behind it exists a complex web of private holdings, real estate portfolios, and investments that are nearly impossible to track or quantify. And at the nexus of this financial labyrinth, the royal family, with Sheikha Moza playing a key role. But who exactly is this powerful woman, and how did she rise to such prominence in a deeply conservative part of the world? Born in 1959 to a prominent Qatari family, Moza bint Nasser married Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani in 1977, who would later become the Emir of Qatar from 1995 to 2013. But unlike many royal consorts in the region who remain in the background, Sheikha Moza took a dramatically different path. She became the most visible face of Qatar on the world stage, a stylish, educated, and charismatic representative of her nation. While her husband engineered Qatar's economic transformation, Sheikha Moza was building something perhaps even more valuable: soft power. But just as we start to understand Moza's rise, we need to address the trillion-dollar question. Is she truly worth trillions? And if so, where does this almost unfathomable wealth actually come from? To answer that, we need to peek behind the veil of one of the world's most private royal families and follow the money to its source. And what we discover might challenge everything you thought you knew about how wealth is measured in the 21st century. But before we reveal those financial secrets, let's step inside the world that this wealth has built, a reality so lavish that it barely seems possible. Inside the Golden Palace. What does home look like when money is truly no object? For Sheikha Moza and the Qatari royal family, the answer is Al Wajba Palace, one of several royal residences that redefine the very concept of luxury. While the palace itself is highly secured and largely hidden from public view, sources familiar with the royal residences describe a world that makes the palaces of Europe look almost modest by comparison. Imagine entering a space where every surface, from floors to ceilings, is adorned with precious materials. Italian marble, 24-karat gold leaf, crystal chandeliers the size of small cars, and furniture handcrafted by artisans who work exclusively for the royal family. One former staff member, speaking on condition of anonymity, described bathrooms with solid gold fixtures, faucets embedded with diamonds, and towel warmers that cost more than the average American home. It's not just wealth, they explained. It's a completely different relationship with the concept of money. Price is literally never discussed or considered. The main palace reportedly spans over 1.2 million square feet, nearly 28 acres of living space under one roof. To put that in perspective, that's about 20 times the size of the White House. But perhaps most stunning is what lies beneath. A climate-controlled underground garage filled with one of the world's most valuable car collections, estimated to be worth over $100 million. Bugattis, custom Rolls-Royces, rare Ferraris, vehicles that most of us will only ever see in museums, all sitting under one roof, many barely driven. Yet the true extravagance of Sheikha Moza's life isn't found in stationary possessions, but in how she moves around the world. For international travel, the royal family maintains a fleet of private aircraft that would make even billionaire CEOs jealous. The crown jewel is a customized Boeing 747-8, valued at over $500 million after its extensive interior modifications. Unlike the standard 747s used for commercial travel, this aircraft has been transformed into a flying palace, complete with multiple bedrooms, dining rooms, conference facilities, and even a medical center. The interior reportedly features materials like rare woods, hand-knotted carpets, and gold-plated elements throughout. For shorter regional trips, the family has access to a fleet of smaller private jets and helicopters, ensuring they never have to experience the inconvenience of commercial travel or traffic. And when at sea, Sheikha Moza has been linked to one of the world's largest super yachts, the 436-foot Serene, a vessel so exclusive that Bill Gates once paid $5 million just to rent it for a week. With amenities including multiple swimming pools, a submarine hangar, an underwater viewing room, and a snow room. Yes, that's a room where it snows on demand. It represents the pinnacle of maritime luxury. But perhaps what truly sets Sheikha Moza apart is her personal style. Unlike some wealthy individuals who hide from public view, she has embraced a carefully cultivated public image, becoming a global fashion icon in the process. Her wardrobe is estimated to be worth tens of millions, featuring custom pieces from the world's top designers. What makes her style unique is how she's managed to blend traditional Islamic modesty with high fashion, often wearing turbans and dresses that cover her body while still making bold fashion statements. A single outfit worn by Sheikha Moza to an international event can easily cost upwards of $100,000 when accounting for custom clothing, jewelry, and accessories. Her collection of handbags alone, featuring rare Hermes Birkins and custom pieces made by artisans who work exclusively for royal clients, would likely fetch tens of millions at auction. But all of this, the palaces, the planes, the yachts, the fashion, they're just the outward manifestations of power. The true source of Sheikha Moza's influence lies elsewhere, in a global network of investments and institutions that extend Qatari soft power around the world. And that's where we begin to understand not just how wealthy she truly is, but something far more interesting: what she's doing with all that money, and why some Western intelligence agencies consider her one of the most powerful women in the world. But to understand that, we need to follow the money to its source and examine how the royal family's wealth is actually structured. Because the truth behind those trillionaire rumors might be more complex and more fascinating than simple numbers could ever convey. The wealth machine. To understand the true extent of Sheikha Moza's wealth, we need to understand how Qatar's economic engine actually works. At its core is Qatar Petroleum, now known as Qatar Energy, the state-owned petroleum company that controls the nation's vast oil and natural gas reserves. As the third largest holder of natural gas reserves in the world, this single company generates billions in revenue annually. But here's where Qatar differs from many other resource-rich nations. Under the Constitution, all natural resources are considered the property of the state, and the state, for all practical purposes, is the Al Thani family. The revenues from Qatar's energy exports flow into the Qatar Investment Authority, the nation's sovereign wealth fund. With estimated assets of over $450 billion, the QIA has made headline-grabbing investments around the world. A significant stake in London's Canary Wharf, ownership of the iconic Harrods department store, massive real estate holdings in major cities including New York, London, and Paris. Significant stakes in companies like Volkswagen, Credit Suisse, and Tiffany & Company. But here's where we start to see why calculating Sheikha Moza's personal wealth becomes nearly impossible. The line between state assets and royal family assets is blurry at best and completely invisible at worst. Beyond the QIA, Sheikha Moza personally chairs the Qatar Foundation, a non-profit organization with an endowment estimated at over $45 billion. While technically a charitable organization focused on education, science, and community development, the foundation also controls countless valuable assets and investments. The most visible is Education City, a 3,300-acre campus in Doha that hosts branches of elite universities including Georgetown, Northwestern, and Texas A&M. The construction alone cost billions, not counting the ongoing operational expenses. Then there are the private business interests. Members of the Al Thani family, including Sheikha Moza's children, hold positions throughout Qatar's economy, from telecommunications to banking, construction to manufacturing. Each of these connections represents not just influence, but direct access to substantial wealth. So when we ask, is Sheikha Moza truly worth trillions? We're asking the wrong question. The better question is, does it even matter? Because what Sheikha Moza has is something potentially more valuable than simple net worth. She has access, unfettered, unlimited access to the resources of an entire nation with one of the highest GDPs per capita in the world. Whether her technical net worth is $50 billion or $500 billion becomes almost irrelevant when you control institutions with hundreds of billions in assets and can direct national policy regarding resources worth trillions. This is wealth on a scale that defies conventional measurement, where the distinction between personal and state assets becomes philosophical rather than practical. But with such unfathomable wealth comes inevitable scrutiny. And for all the glittering palaces and global investments, dark questions linger about how Qatar built its fortune so quickly and at what human cost. Behind the gleaming skyscrapers and luxury lifestyles lies a troubling reality that even trillions in assets can't fully obscure. A reality that raises profound questions about the moral cost of such extraordinary wealth. But before we explore those shadows, let's examine something equally fascinating: the way Sheikha Moza has leveraged this wealth into something potentially even more valuable. Global influence and power that extends far beyond Qatar's tiny borders. The soft power empire. While her husband and son controlled Qatar's vast financial resources, Sheikha Moza was building something equally valuable: a soft power empire that has helped transform Qatar from an unknown desert state to a global influencer in just one generation. Her approach has been both strategic and multifaceted, focusing on areas that generate maximum international prestige and influence: education, art, sports, media, and humanitarian efforts. Education has been perhaps her most significant focus. As chairperson of the Qatar Foundation, she spearheaded the creation of Education City, a massive complex that hosts branches of elite Western universities, including Georgetown, Northwestern, and Cornell. With a reported investment of over $33 billion, this single project has positioned Qatar as an educational hub in the Middle East. But it's not just about prestige, it's about influence. By bringing these institutions to Qatar, Sheikha Moza has ensured that thousands of future leaders from across the region are educated in an environment shaped by Qatari values and perspectives. Then there's sports, perhaps Qatar's most visible soft power tool. The 2022 FIFA World Cup was the culmination of a sports strategy that has seen Qatar acquire Paris Saint-Germain Football Club, sponsor Barcelona FC, and host numerous international sporting championships. While these investments were officially made through the Qatar Sports Investments Fund, insiders say Sheikha Moza was instrumental in recognizing sports potential as a diplomatic tool early on. Media represents another pillar of Qatar's influence strategy. The launch and funding of Al Jazeera, now one of the world's largest news networks, transformed Qatar into a media powerhouse. With broadcasts in multiple languages reaching hundreds of millions of viewers, Al Jazeera has given Qatar a voice in global affairs far beyond what its size would normally permit. Art and culture have been specific passions of Sheikha Moza. Under her patronage, Qatar has spent billions building museums and acquiring art, including the record-breaking $250 million purchase of Paul Cézanne's The Card Players, reportedly the most expensive painting ever sold at the time. The Museum of Islamic Art and the National Museum of Qatar aren't just cultural institutions. They're statements of Qatar's ambition to be seen as a sophisticated global player, rather than merely a wealthy energy state. Perhaps most intriguing is Sheikha Moza's humanitarian work, which extends Qatari influence into regions where Western powers sometimes fear to tread. Through foundations like Education Above All, she has funded schools in conflict zones and developing nations, creating goodwill while establishing Qatar's presence in strategically important regions. This multifaceted soft power strategy has transformed Qatar's international position completely. A nation that was virtually unknown globally 50 years ago now hosts major peace negotiations, mediates international conflicts, and has a seat at tables where decisions affecting billions of people are made. And at the center of this transformation stands Sheikha Moza, elegantly dressed, articulate, and representing a carefully constructed image of Islamic modernity that appeals to both Western and Middle Eastern sensibilities. Former U.S. diplomats have described her as one of the most effective soft power operators on the global stage, using Qatar's financial resources to buy not just assets, but influence and legitimacy. Yet for all this carefully constructed global image, questions and controversies continue to swirl around Qatar's rapid rise and the true nature of its wealth and power. Because behind the gleaming skyscrapers and philanthropic initiatives lies a more complex reality, one that includes troubling questions about labor practices, political freedoms, and the true cost of building a trillion-dollar dynasty in a single generation. The darker side of wealth. No honest examination of Qatar's wealth can ignore the troubling questions that accompany it. As the nation transformed from desert to global powerhouse in a single generation, the human cost of this rapid development has come under intense scrutiny. At the center of these concerns are the migrant workers who quite literally built modern Qatar. With a native population of just over 300,000 Qatari citizens, the country relies on approximately 2 million foreign workers, primarily from South Asia and Africa, to construct and maintain its lavish infrastructure. Human rights organizations have documented disturbing conditions faced by many of these workers. Confiscated passports, unpaid wages, dangerous working conditions, and a controversial sponsorship system known as kafala that gives employers extraordinary control over workers' lives. The preparation for the 2022 FIFA World Cup brought these issues to global attention, with reports suggesting that thousands of workers may have died during the massive construction projects required to host the tournament, while Sheikh Moza and the Qatar Foundation have publicly supported labor reforms. Critics argue that meaningful change has been slow and inconsistent. The contrast between the workers' living conditions and the almost unimaginable luxury enjoyed by the royal family raises profound moral questions about the foundation of Qatar's wealth. Beyond labor concerns, Qatar's political structure also faces criticism. Despite projecting a modern, progressive image internationally, Qatar remains an absolute monarchy with limited political freedoms for its citizens. The Al Thani family maintains tight control over all aspects of governance, with minimal space for dissent or political opposition. While supporters argue this system has provided stability and prosperity, critics see a contradiction between Qatar's international advocacy for democracy in other nations and its own autocratic governance model. Qatar's geopolitical positions have also generated controversy. Its willingness to maintain relationships with groups like the Taliban and Hamas, often characterized as mediation efforts, has drawn criticism from Western allies. Meanwhile, its complex relationship with Iran has created tensions with neighboring Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states. These contradictions create a complex picture. The same wealth that funds Education City, international humanitarian initiatives, and Qatar's cultural renaissance also sustains a political system with significant human rights questions. The same royal family that champions certain progressive causes internationally maintains traditional autocratic control domestically. For Sheikh Moza specifically, these contradictions present unique challenges. As the public face of Qatar's modern, progressive image, she must navigate between traditional values and international expectations, between royal privilege and calls for greater democratization. Some observers see her as a genuine force for gradual, careful modernization within Qatar's cultural context. Others view her philanthropic work and international advocacy as primarily image management for a system that remains fundamentally unequal. The truth, as with most complex issues, likely lies somewhere in between. What's undeniable is that the vast wealth controlled by Qatar's royal family comes with equally vast responsibilities and contradictions. But beyond these public controversies lies perhaps the most intriguing question of all, one rarely discussed in public, but whispered about in financial and intelligence circles around the world. What is the royal family preparing for? Why the massive global investments? The diversification away from fossil fuels, the cultivation of international allies across the political spectrum. Some analysts believe the answer lies in Qatar's precarious geopolitical position and a royal family planning not just for prosperity, but for survival in an increasingly unstable region. The future kingdom. As we've seen, the wealth controlled by Sheikh Moza and the Qatari royal family extends far beyond simple luxury. It represents a strategic asset being deployed to shape Qatar's future in a world of increasing uncertainty. The question that fascinates geopolitical analysts isn't just how much wealth the royal family has accumulated, but why they're investing it the way they are. The pattern reveals a comprehensive strategy for national survival and relevance in a post-oil world. Consider the portfolio. Massive investments in education and research, strategic acquisitions of prestigious Western brands and properties, development of Qatar as a cultural and sports hub, diversification into technology, healthcare, and sustainable industries, cultivation of a vast diplomatic network spanning traditional Western allies, Asian powers, and even groups considered controversial by some Western nations. This isn't random spending. It's a carefully calculated insurance policy for a tiny nation in one of the world's most volatile regions. With a native population of just 300,000 and situated between the regional powers of Saudi Arabia and Iran, Qatar is acutely aware of its vulnerability. The 2017 blockade by neighboring countries, which cut off Qatar's land borders and air routes, only reinforced this reality. While Qatar's vast natural gas reserves provide immense wealth today, the royal family is clearly planning for a world beyond fossil fuels. The Qatar National Vision 2030 explicitly aims to transform the country into a knowledge-based economy less dependent on hydrocarbon exports. Sheikh Moza's focus on education becomes particularly significant in this context. By developing world-class educational and research facilities, Qatar is attempting to position itself as an intellectual hub that will remain relevant, even as the world transitions away from fossil fuels. Qatar's willingness to maintain relationships across the geopolitical spectrum, from hosting a U.S. military base to maintaining dialogue with Iran, from mediating conflicts in Africa to engaging with groups like the Taliban, reflects a pragmatic understanding of its need for diverse allies in an unpredictable world. Within this strategy, Sheikh Moza's role has been crucial. As the international face of Qatar's modernization, she has helped the nation navigate the delicate balance between Islamic traditions and global engagement, between royal authority and progressive reforms. Now, as a new generation of the Al Thani family rises to prominence, including Sheikh Moza's son, the current Emir Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, and her daughter Sheikha Al Mayasa, who chairs the Qatar Museums Authority, the question becomes how this extraordinary wealth and influence will evolve. In a world facing climate change, technological disruption, and geopolitical realignment, the strategies pioneered by Sheikh Moza and the Qatari royal family may prove prescient. By using today's fossil fuel wealth to build tomorrow's knowledge economy and diplomatic network, they're attempting to ensure Qatar's relevance long after the last natural gas shipment leaves its shores. This, perhaps, is the true significance of what some call the trillionaire queen of Qatar. Beyond the palaces and luxury is a case study in how wealth at this scale can be leveraged not just for personal benefit, but for national transformation and survival. Whether this strategy will ultimately succeed remains to be seen. But one thing is certain. The story of Sheikh Moza and Qatar's extraordinary wealth is far more complex and far more strategically significant than the simplified narratives of royal excess that often dominate discussions of Gulf monarchies. We began this journey by asking whether Sheikha Moza, the most prominent wife of Qatar's former emir, truly deserves the title of trillionaire queen. The answer, as we've discovered, isn't as simple as a number on a balance sheet. In a nation where the line between state and royal family assets remains deliberately blurred, traditional concepts of personal wealth become almost meaningless. What matters isn't whether Sheikha Moza personally controls assets worth trillions, but rather her access to and influence over the vast resources of an entire nation. Through her leadership of the Qatar Foundation, her patronage of education and the arts, her carefully cultivated international image, and her role as mother to the current emir, Sheikha Moza has helped transform Qatar from an obscure peninsula into a global player with influence far beyond its size. The palaces, private jets, and luxury lifestyle that capture headlines represent just the surface of a much deeper story, one about the strategic deployment of wealth to ensure national survival and relevance in an uncertain world. Qatar's transformation from pearl fishing village to global powerhouse in a single generation represents one of history's most dramatic national reinventions. At the center of this transformation stands the Al Thani family, with Sheikha Moza playing a pivotal role in shaping not just how Qatar's wealth is spent, but how the nation is perceived globally. Whether viewed as a visionary modernizer, a shrewd strategist, or simply the beneficiary of geological fortune, Sheikha Moza's impact on Qatar and the broader Middle East is undeniable. Her ability to navigate between tradition and modernity, between Western expectations and Islamic values, has created a unique model of female leadership in a region where women's public roles have historically been limited. As Qatar continues its ambitious journey of national transformation, the legacy of its trillionaire queen will likely be measured not by the luxury she enjoyed, but by the institutions and relationships she helped build, and whether they succeed in securing Qatar's position in a post-fossil fuel world. The true story of Sheikha Moza and Qatar's extraordinary wealth isn't just about money. It's about power, vision, and the complex realities of building a nation's future on the shifting sands of global politics. If you found this deep dive into Qatar's royal wealth fascinating, make sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell to catch our upcoming investigations into the world's most powerful families and hidden financial empires. Have questions about Qatar's wealth or suggestions for our next financial investigation? Drop them in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you're interested in learning more about how sovereign wealth funds like Qatar's are reshaping global markets, check out our special report linked in the description. Thanks for watching, and remember, in a world where wealth equals power, understanding who controls the money means understanding who shapes our future.